You can support this podcast for $3 a month at patreon.com/Copytraders Club. Or find me on eToro, username Gavin Macaulay, and add me to a watch list for future content. Thanks for listening. Copytraders Club, where you can learn how to make better decisions and more money copy trading. I'm Gavin Macaulay, my name and username on eToro. My aim as an eToro enthusiast is to demystify this new and uncharted world of copy trading, understand what are the pitfalls and best practices, and how ultimately to succeed as a copy trader. Here we go. Copytraders Club, Season 3, Episode 18. And today is a roundtable episode featuring Gasper, Ingvar, and Reinhardt. What three magnificent first names. Like epic heroes or something. Speaking of heroes, rest in peace Andy Rourke, bass player of the Smiths, the most important band of my teenage years, and therefore forever. Andy Rourke, thank you for the music. Back in the land of the living, we say hello and welcome Gasper the Globetrotter. How are you, Gasper? And where are you?
Very well. I'm very well. Thanks for asking. I'm currently in Indonesia, in Bali, to be precise, of all the places.
Oh, wow. Well, I've just spoken to all the guests about whether if there's a dog barking or anything in the background, they can hit mute. There's now a dog barking behind me, so that's handy enough. Let me see now. I have a little bit of housekeeping to do, but first of all, we will welcome Ingvar. Last time we spoke, you were vacationing in a Swedish forest. As we approach midsummer, where are you now?
Not in the forest, so I'm in the city, in fact, but I might go back to the forest for midsummer. That is to be determined.
Very good. And the third member of our panel is Reinhardt. Our first conversation was set against the backdrop of the sound of South African lawnmowers and refuse collectors. How are we doing for background noise where you are? Are you currently in the Rainbow Nation?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Gav. I'm in Johannesburg. There's no lawnmowers today. There's also not a lot of electricity in Johannesburg at the moment, so hopefully noise levels will be low.
Okay. Up on screen are your usernames. I'm just going to change that so that people can see. Oh, no. Now people can see your usernames on eToro. It was your actual names. So, this is something of an international eToro symposium, this episode, which is divided into three parts. Part 1, latest market developments. Part 2, artificial intelligence, and part 3, eToro advertising. So part 1, latest market developments. The debt ceiling, inflation, the Fed, the economy. How does it all look to you, and how is it affecting your investing on eToro? Ingvar, perhaps you can get the ball rolling by sharing your thoughts on this topic.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we are now 5 months in, more or less, into the year. And from my perspective, I think it is largely going as expected. So I think most of us were expecting the year to be a bit volatile, given all the discussions around interest rates and inflation, of course. Also, the debt ceiling topic, which is currently quite hot, that was something which was kind of expected to come up around this time. So overall, I would say with the big topics, it is nothing unexpected. But of course, volatility always hits market participants one way or the other. When I look at what I'm doing in the markets, that is also in line with the fact that I was expecting most of the developments for this year. From my perspective, I think at least if you have a long-term strategy, then it's good to sit tight and see through these short-term volatile moments and rather keep the midterm and the long-term in focus.
So you're very much a long-term kind of guy, Ingvar. Does that mean you're not doing anything making any shorter-term movements? You're sort of observing placidly?
For the moment, yes. At the moment, I don't see the particular need to make any big moves right now. Simply because also the market, in my opinion, has been a bit more or less in the same range over the last couple of weeks. It's been going back and forth. And therefore, in terms of my strategy, that did not bring the stocks yet to the points where I think it is good to sell them. On the other hand, also the market has not gone down to the degree where I would see much opportunities yet to buy. And in that sense, there is currently a bit of a holding pattern also in my portfolio.
Now, speaking of sitting placidly, Gasper is famously a very mindful, popular investor. There are pictures of the Buddha behind him as we speak.
Unintentional, I have to.
Yeah. You don't carry those around with you when you move from place to place?
That's not mine. I'm just renting something here.
So I'm wondering, are you also sitting calmly and watching things unfold, or are you being more participative in the short to medium term?
I guess if we define participation as the number of trades, executed on the platform, I would say that I'm just basically observing, because I just looked up, I think in the last 6 months or something like that, I had maybe 9-10 trades on eToro. So obviously, I'm not trying to ride any waves or take advantages of any short near-term volatility. I think the historic returns show that missing out on some of the best days within a certain period can really cripple your returns. So I try not to sort of try to figure out when to enter, when to buy, when to sell. That said, I'm not blind to any kind of a opportunity that might appear. I mean, we've seen with the banks recently that things can really, really go south and start to break. So if there is an event such as that, where some of the maybe interesting companies that have a sort of a long-term potential, at least in terms of growth prospects, especially in tech or the kinds of companies that I like to invest in, if there is something like that happening, I'm happy to jump in and maybe reinforce a position if this is a company that I already own, or maybe initiate a new sort of position. We've seen with Meta, what happened a year ago when basically the whole market just turned, against it in a kind of a narrative twist, and then the stock has surged like 100% since then. So these are the opportunities that I pay attention to, but I'm not sort of concerned about what Fed is doing in that sense that whatever. I'm not trying to sort of piggyback on any meetings, that they may issue or sort of communication, but just follow what's happening, but, try to resist any kind of a rushed reaction.
And Reinhardt, are you going to buck the trend and tell us you've been in and out like crazy in response to all the
I will say the last year has been, 2022 was rough. I think the last time I spoke to you, it was just the start of that, a little bit of that downturn, especially in tech. So, I mean, I've never been that active in terms of trades on eToro. So I'm like, just echo some of the stuff that Gasper is talking about here. Also obviously more long-term focused. I try to focus more on the companies like I've always done, despite what's going on in the macro environment. And like Gasper said, I mean, obviously it's good to know what's going on there and keep abreast of what's happening. But for me, it's always been focusing on those companies and what's happening within those businesses. But like I said, last 2022 was rough, especially as predominantly a technology investor. So I think I've learned a couple of things in terms of what's reasonable versus rational, in terms of what those holdings will look like in portfolio and going forward with inflation rate and uncertainty. So, yeah, I mean, not too many trades, but I have, I've made a little bit of a couple of changes in terms of being too focused, too exposed to just a couple of companies, especially in the tech sector, to a little bit more diversifying to a couple of dividend yielding stocks that I'm looking into. So, yeah.
And are we all 100% invested, or are we keeping some cash on the sidelines? Ingvar, back to you.
For myself, I'm currently around 92% invested, so that leaves around 8% in cash. I think as a long-term investor, normally it's better to be invested than not, especially if your strategy is particularly long-term oriented. Like it was said before, otherwise you really face the risk that you might be missing out on the next rally, because especially in environments like today, where there is always lots of things on the horizon, and everybody is expecting a bit of a recession, those things, as soon as the outlook improves, can also just start to rip again. And then you want to participate in that from the start. And personally, I feel confident with my company selection because I do really deep research. So I believe that those companies do have potential. And therefore, there is no reason not to own them, even if the short-term outlook is maybe a little bit depressed in the view of some people.
Yeah, and they also say the market likes to climb a wall of worry. So when everyone's expecting disaster, it just quietly goes about its business. And you're all saying, or I've heard at least a couple of times now, about not being too cautious because you don't want to miss out on any of those upswings. That's been the story of my year so far. Far too cautious, and thinking that that was the sensible thing to do, to preserve that cash and avoid the inevitable drop that hasn't really come. Meanwhile, those who've been invested in some of the more spec tech have been absolutely laughing all the way to the bank this year. So you live and learn. Okay, so are we worried about the political scenario, the debt ceiling? What's the latest news on that, Gasper? And is it just a lot of noise and the same thing's going to happen that's always happened? Or is it different this time?
I think I heard somewhere this has been like the 70 something consecutive time that the debt ceiling issue has sort of surfaced up, and every time they have resolved it in a way that didn't entail any catastrophe. So I think there's basically, I mean, you can always have a different situation, but I think if history rhymes, then I think it's basically a noisy, very click-worthy thing to be having in the mainstream media. But essentially, I think that it's a nothing burger. I do remember the last time around. I don't quite recall how far back that was, but I do remember like being such a big issue, like a very pertinent issue, and almost every day you could read or listen to statements of politicians or pundits about the debt ceiling, and then eventually they just got together and I guess cleared it out. So I'm not really too worried about that. I think the consequences obviously would be pretty sort of catastrophic, if I can use that word. At least according to the to the pundits. I can't really claim any sort of deep understanding of all the mechanics around it. But I just I don't kind of see it as an eventuality that US would compromise its position in the global economy by defaulting on the debt. So
yeah, it just struck me that it was about to get resolved. It seemed a week or 10 days ago, everyone said that we were on the cusp of resolving it, and the market was going to get a nice little jump from that injection of positivity. Whereupon I closed some of my short positions because I didn't want to be stung by that jump in positivity. And there's been no jump in positivity, but I'm not here just to list my feelings. Let's go over to Reinhardt and ask him, what are your views on the situation at the moment, and is it of any significance to what you're doing right now, or how do you think it's going to play out?
Yeah, I think kind of share the sentiments of Gasper there. I mean, I can't remember the exact year, but I think it was like in 2018, 2019 was the last one. There was also a big fuss being made about it then. In the absence of anything bigger like, a COVID or, war in the Ukraine, that was the major story at that time. I remember the volatility just went really through the roof because of that, because that was the main story at the time that all the news outlets were focusing on. And it's one of those things like you see all the time, it's like these macro stories. People come out and will say, that's this is like a doomsday event, but like Gasper said, these kind of things happen so many times. So I'm also of the opinion they will definitely sort it out. I mean, interesting thing that I was just listening to the other day on another podcast was people have been very actively looking at going into things like bonds and things because of the yields have been so good. But because of this whole debt ceiling thing, people also now a bit hesitating because this is like the safest investment you could probably make, from a risk-free perspective, investing in U.S. government bonds. But now, because of this thing going on, people are hesitating a little bit. But I mean, in general, I think this it's too big not to sort out. So I don't think it's anything really to worry about.
So sort of a unanimity of approach on the panel here today. Not getting too excited about such matters. Let's move on to the next topic coming up in part 2, which might be more fertile ground for agreement and disagreement. Artificial intelligence. When we do so, we'll have a little bit of music and see which one of our 3 panelists features in this tune.
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Copytraders Club.
Copytraders Club.
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Copytraders Club.
Copytraders Club.
Okay, part 2, artificial intelligence. Is it a game changer or just the current buzzword? I would like to explore your thoughts on AI. Is it worth all the hype? Will it lead to a utopia where humans indulge in a life of leisure and creativity while machines do all the work? Or viene una tormenta? Is there a storm coming? So, what are your experiences? What applications are you most intrigued by? What role does it or will it play in your investing process? Will GPT trading and the like kill the idea of a popular investor, or indeed any other conventional money manager? Gasper, I saw you discussing this on Twitter with some guy called Yanni. So why don't you start this section and share your thoughts with us?
Yeah, let's ask the biological intelligence what it thinks about the artificial intelligence. I've actually honestly been very amazed by what ChatGPT or OpenAI has done with its language model. Just a few days ago, I was discussing this with a friend of mine. So I just started asking it, what do you know? Because I've gotten into this plugin enabled ChatGPT, so it can browse and so I just typed in, of course, being the narcissist that I am, what can you tell me about Gasper Sopi? And we got into this conversation. I'm gonna cut it a bit short, but it ended up with me asking, so based on what you just realized about me, can you guess my zodiac sign? And it guessed. It told me that I was a Pisces, but it didn't know, my date of birth. And I was just completely blown away how this system works. So in that respect, I think it's going to be a big sort of enabler, just like all other tools in humanity have been sort of extensions of our biological abilities, starting with, very simple tools like, shovels and all the, hammers and stuff like that enable us to build other tools. So I think ChatGPT is not going to be any different in that sense, except that the sort of, the high level, I guess, paradigm is moving from the physical world into the digital world. So I think it's going to be a sort of a kind of a accelerant of the human transition into more of a digital or more of a like metaverse kind of a existence, if I can, sort of look at it that way, maybe a bit more sort of esoterically. To bring it back to the investment game, there are some plugins now that are fairly good at bringing outside information, creating sort of resumes of news around a certain company. So, specifically, for example, in terms of eToro, you can use it already to sort of, help you with research and help you understand how to sort of approach maybe a strategy, help you to learn about alternative approaches around certain things. I think basically the ceiling is very high, and I'm just looking forward to see where this takes us. I think it's going to be great.
Okay, Ingvar, have you been looking yourself up as well? What did ChatGPT know about you?
Yeah, it's hard to follow on that one. I think I have a general understanding of what AI in its current shape and form is and what it can do. And of course, I also have my own thoughts about it. You mentioned before, is it the next game changer or is it a buzzword? And I think at the moment it's both and. I think there is really, really great potential for the future as to what you can achieve with artificial intelligence. And to just have it in very broad categories, I think it really opens up a whole new way of going through information, of collecting information, and then afterwards also sorting information and preparing it for further processing of humans. So in that sense, I believe there is really a great step forward in terms of productivity. So that said, of course, the systems also need to be designed in a way that humans can afterwards use the output in a productive way. And that might be the thing which still needs to be pushed forward. I think at the moment, it's not really there yet. So I've tried a couple of the most recent innovations online, and the results are okay. For me, they were not mind-blowing, but it was interesting. And I think there is an interesting road forward as well. But I think there is still a long way to go. And in terms of investing in AI names, I think at the moment it is quite a bit of a hype, especially after what we saw last week with NVIDIA. I think it is really the buzzword of the year. So, the 1 year it is, for example, mRNA vaccines, and you feel, okay, there is endless possibilities with this, which is true, but it takes 5, 10, 15 years to play out. Then the other year it was blockchain, just to make another example. Currently, everybody's depressed about blockchain, so people need something new to focus on. And now it is AI. So for me, currently, it's just the story which people like to chase in terms of investing. But that does not take away, in my opinion, that there is great potential in the underlying technology. But I think it will take a longer time to play out than people currently think.
And what about the issue of whether it can be simply used as an investing tool to reduce your workload, or to tailor the amount of information just to condense that? Or is it going to get to the state where, why would you invest in a popular investor? You can just use artificial intelligence to pick stocks and to balance your portfolio. And how far away are we from that, Ingvar?
I think that's an interesting proposal, and it seems like something which people have been searching for many years. So that it's not just this year that this came around, because these machine learning algorithms, they exist already since a couple of years. And I've had people even like 5-7 years ago telling me, in a couple of years, everything is going to be automated and you're going to have an algorithm which just beats everything. But it is still a race afterwards. Everybody is trying to build their own machine learning algorithm, and it is always with a certain bias from the person or the organization building it. So you still have a unique investment strategy behind it. And I think that is something which will also still be the case in the future. There's always somebody building whatever it is that is supposed to help you. So I think it is rather unlikely that it will completely replace, say, fund managers or popular investors.
Yeah. Now, Reinhardt, you're a big, strapping South African man. They're very well known for being problem solvers and good with their hands and good with machines. I wonder which side of this you're going to come down on, if indeed you're going to come down on a particular side.
Yeah,
Are
I think,
machines really the answer, or is there something that we can't put our finger on, intangible, about the human brain in this area that can't be machined?
well, just to quickly touch on, I think on this area, I think there's always going to be a place for individual fund managers. And if you look at the history, I mean, you go back into the stats and stuff, just investing in an index, so mostly people will say, that's where the smart money is, but there's always people want to invest with people that might have an edge or a specific knowledge in their specific sector they specialize in. So I think that human element will always be there. Index investing, algorithmic trading, that's been out there for a long time. For me, I think the onset of ChatGPT and the generative AI, I think for me that's a game changer. I think in terms of other technology areas. So I'm going to disagree a little bit there in terms of, I think it's not just the hype. I think this is really, we've heard this before with stuff like blockchain and stuff like that, but I really do think this is just the beginning. I think this is like, not to sound like all those other over enthusiastic people, but this is really for me like what the internet was like back in '99 when people were trying to figure it out. Like, yeah, okay, but do you really want to go buy something online? Is that really going to work? And everything that just evolved from there. So I really think this is just the start of it. So I've been following this quite a bit. I've been playing around with tools. Like from a personal perspective, I do a lot of stuff on Power BI and analytics and stuff. So I've like outsourced a lot of that work already to ChatGPT, where it solves a lot of the issues and comes up with its like Power BI calculations and stuff for me. So that just in my personal work experience, that's like been a game changer for me in terms of productivity. So things that would take me like a couple of days to go and figure out, test the formula, test the calculation, is it right? I just literally ask ChatGPT and I even give it an example, and then it just gives me the formula. So I think it's going to come down to like from an individual level, from people in workplaces and things like that. I think it's going to be people that adopt it now early and try and make it work for them, versus people that just completely write it off and say, it's just like a buzzword. I think it's going to be a big change coming in terms of the workforce. We've already seen it now with some companies. Like, I don't know if you guys follow some, like that company Chegg is a publicly listed company. It lost like half its market cap in a day, like went down like 50%, because they basically offer educational services, helping people, students, tutors, with answering questions to homework. So obviously ChatGPT can do that, and can do that quite effectively. So basically within the span of like a couple of days, the whole Chegg publicly listed company's market valuation just dropped by half. So I think that's just the start of it, and all the applications being built on top of it already. Like, you've got ChatGPT, that's obviously mainline news and the media and stuff, but they've got other tools like AutoGPT and PDF GPT that I was playing around the other day. So you literally just you can upload an entire book, a PDF book, and then start asking it questions. So just another example, I saw one of the energy companies in the UK was on CNBC, I think it was yesterday. So like something like 40% of all the inbound questions from a customer support perspective is being answered by AI. So I think, these kind of things, it's not just like a hype thing. I think it's already making a huge impact in the business landscape.
Yeah. I read a book a few years ago on this Surviving AI, I think it was called. And like I mentioned earlier, it said that perhaps the logical conclusion, if it's going to take so much of our workload away, is that there's going to be far more humans than there is work to do. So are we all going to end up sitting by the lake playing a guitar and writing poetry? Gasper, is that your plan?
I'm already doing that.
In Bali.
So, I mean, it's a valid concern. And I think some of the points being made here, both in terms of, the side that thinks is overhyped and we're not still there, and the side that says, the boost in productivity is already a real thing, as a tangible thing. I tend to agree with kind of both sides, because it's certainly true for me that the productivity has increased with ChatGPT, and it's also true that it's there's a lot of BS output that comes from the model that tries to wing stuff, makes stuff up as it goes, because that's what it's programmed to do. But I would say, like, in the same way, for example, that the computer didn't really destroy the pencil. I don't think that ChatGPT will sort of destroy or take away, or any kind of AI technology will take away from humans' innate, I think, desire to construct and to be sort of productive beings. So in my view, it's basically an accelerant. I think that the types of things that we are going to be able to create is pretty much going to be, how can I say, I think it's going to be something that we haven't encountered before. It's going to be on the plane of more of a sort of creative development at scale, if you will, sort of a rising of the consciousness of the humanity. In that sense, it's going to shift more towards some kind of an intangible intellectual work. I think learning is going to accelerate. Like we've mentioned Chegg. I already learned so much through ChatGPT. Most of my queries now happen, either to the Google's version or to the OpenAI version. So, I kind of, maybe, I have this sort of innate bias toward optimism and positivity, but I tend to be on that side. And I think from what I can observe about how humans are, I think, we like to be creative. We don't like to just sit idle. Creating music or creating art is a part of a human growth. So I think that's going to also accelerate, but that's going to also contribute to scientific discovery, to technological discovery. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So I think it's good that we have something like this that's going to open up the space for creativity.
Well, it's true. It does really make you think about what humans are. I was listening to a song the other day that William Shatner did with Ben Folds called In Love, link in the show notes, where William Shatner is frankly recounting how he managed to wheedle his way into the affections of a female. I went in for the kill. I'd read the same books. I learned to ape the motions of a sensitive human being, and we were oh so happy. Which I suspect a lot of guys can relate to, aping, replicating emotional responses and behaviors to achieve a result. And then I was thinking, well, maybe we all do that more than we care to acknowledge in life. To what extent are humans merely replicating machines themselves? And maybe, is all human activity machinable more than we would care to admit? We like to think we're sort of special divine creatures. And perhaps there's terrifyingly few areas of human endeavor that are not machinable. Leading to the question, like, what would be beyond artificial intelligence? Ingvar, there's a nice little nugget for you to chew on.
Those are some very big questions, and I'm not going to claim that I have the answer for that. But just pivoting a bit to this maybe more acute question of what are humans going to do if there is AI which is taking over large parts of the economy. To me, it feels a bit like this question has been around since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, right? And to some degree, it is justified, of course, because the purpose of new technology is usually to make things more efficient and in many cases also to reduce, say, manual labor. So in that sense, I believe there is a big challenge coming because AI does have that potential to really reshape a vast amount of jobs, either the customer-facing ones or the ones on the back end. I think the AI really has the potential to reach pretty much everything, including also the creative industries like you touched upon before. So that is a challenge. And again, I'm not going to claim that I have the answer to, or that I have the answer how to solve this challenge. But that, I think, will really be the question for many people around the world, companies, individuals, governments, how to address those challenges and make sure that we as humans then also migrate to the next stage of our development and find other tasks which need to be accomplished. I think we will get there, but it will be a challenge.
You mentioned the creative arts there a second ago. Did anyone see Jensen Huang of NVIDIA's presentation about the future of video games with AI-infused characters? Well, that was pretty mad. You know, there's these characters in the video games that have a certain amount of data behind them. They have a backstory, and you're the main point of view character, and you walk into the bar and you have a conversation with someone, and they give you the information in response to your questions that furthers what you're going to do in the game. And it's all sort of free form. None of it's sort of pre-programmed questions and answers. That is pretty mad. And I heard Tom Hanks talking on an interview recently about how he could sell the rights to his image for like a series of movies, like for 6 movies going way beyond his death. And they can use all the data that they've captured of his face and his body and his voice and how his muscles move. He can start getting paid for that movie work that he will never actually do. And the movies might only be made after he's no longer with us. I don't know if I've got a question about that, but what do you think about that? All that stuff, Reinhardt? It's pretty mad.
Yeah, just to comment on that, and not really answer a question, but I was also just it's fascinating to me. I was listening to interview with the CEO from LivePerson. So they are an AI company that specializes in the help centers, the call center, software kind of things. So they're creating this. So they've been doing this for years, but obviously now with generative AI, they're going a little bit further in terms of completely automating that call center experience, not talking to a human at all, but that you can actually interface to, like they call the digital twin for a person. But what I found fascinating was what he was saying was they're really on the cusp now where he's input all of his information that's available publicly. So like what you were saying with Tom Hanks. So all of the information that's available about him, all the interviews that he's done before, things like Wikipedia pages, things, all that information is fed in. And obviously you can very easily these days digitize your appearance and everything. And I'm sure you guys have all seen those tools and like music videos and stuff like that's not even the artist, it's just AI doing it on top of something else. So what he was saying is like you can almost foresee that sci-fi future with from movies where you kind of upload what you are, what you've done in this world, and then you can ask it questions. So he's doing that right now. So he's asking himself questions. And the AI has just learned everything that he's done publicly from everything that it's read before. So he was talking about like it's not like an immortality kind of thing, but it's what's fascinating is they're really not on that cusp where you can upload a person, and if that person is no longer there, which is a little bit creepy, but if that person is no longer there in the future, that person, digital version of that person still remains. So you can ask it questions and it'll answer based on that guy's very closely to how that person would have answered the question, his personality traits and everything. And then obviously you've got the visuals and everything as well. So yeah, I mean, it's fascinating.
I mean, who's to say this presentation isn't artificially generated? Maybe none of us are actually here. We're just representations of ourselves.
This is definitely a simulation. We all know that.
Very good. Well, any other final thoughts on artificial intelligence before we move on? Is there anything else that someone's itching to say?
Well, maybe I would just add, like there are some sort of, the biggest, I think, sort of point or sort of the crux of the matter is can AI really become something beyond the simulation, right? Beyond currently it simulates based on the data that's been fed. There are certain principles and rules there are some black boxes. People don't really know how, some machine learning models really work. But essentially, there is no understanding of the machine itself about what it is doing. So in essence, it's like that guy that won, I think, the Canadian won the French Scrabble competition, in the competition of, I don't know, like maybe 30,000 professional French players. He basically essentially learned the whole dictionary of I don't know how many words, and he managed to win the competition without really understanding what 99.9% of the words mean. So it's kind of like there is this philosophical, I think, how can I say, proof that sort of points to the limitations of or experiment, a mind experiment, to the limitations of AI, called the Chinese room, right? You can have a person in a room with a set of rules that you can feed some Chinese characters, and that person, according to a set of rules, can give you the right answer without really understanding any of the characters or knowing anything about Chinese. So I think, it's important to have that in mind, especially some of the, new participants in the investment world. They tend to take AI as a sort of a stamp of approval that, decisions made or produced by AI are correct, or, are somehow superior to humans, without really understanding that it's basically looking at the rear view mirror. And in order to be able to make a solid investment decision requires more than just having access to the past information or to the present information, but also being able to creatively think and understand what are the future companies' products, where are the future revenues going to come from. A lot of growth companies, they themselves, they don't know really, where they're going to end up in terms of products, etc. So there are some, some useful traits that, AI technology has. Mostly, I think what Reinhardt said in terms of manipulating, understanding, structuring data and things like that. But it kind of is still, I think, lacking in terms of, let's say, creating informed decisions or projections into the future, which is what investing is about.
Well, how long before the machines become sentient? That's the question, Gasper.
Exactly.
Okay, well, if we've nothing else to add to that conversation, that was very interesting and certainly food for thought. Coming up at part 3, eToro YouTube adverts. Okay, part 3, eToro YouTube adverts. Now then, I'm sharing these on the screen. I need to take off this banner so we can see what we're doing. The listener or viewer may have noticed some new eToro ads on YouTube. I will link to some in the show notes. Question is, are we seeing a shift in tone? And I'd like to hear your opinions maybe on the approach to advertising, brand improvement. What is it about eToro that you think they ought to be accentuating? I'm just sharing on the screen here newer adverts on YouTube. I've noticed some changes. They seem to have moved away from the cheesiest kind of adverts. Remember that one where all the users are in like windows? Building and watering plants and stuff, kicking a ball around, and it's badly voiced over by Americans, and the voices don't match the people. Well, that whole thing to me seems kind of very plastic and unreal. Now we're seeing things like the one I just showed is purely graphic, showing eToro features voiced over in a quite matter-of-fact sort of way. Now we have some adverts using influencer types like this guy. Not an actor in the real sense, but people who are in finance adjacent areas. Like this chap who's known as Frugal Spender. Don't know if you've seen this. And then there's another one here, which is Lara Jarvis. They're not actors, but they're people saying things like, I use eToro to create an alternative source of income. Really? Do you? I tried to find their profiles on eToro using their real names, but was unable to locate them. Not saying they're not on eToro, but, they may be saying words in return for money, But maybe their accounts are in their spouse's names or something. So I don't know if you guys have checked these out prior to the chat, but I'm wondering, do you think this is a welcome shift in tone? What do you think of this approach? Reinhardt, maybe you could start us off responding to the new eToro YouTube adverts.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good direction for eToro to make it more, I'd say, bring it back to the more normal person, like the everyday person, to see eToro as an app they could use for investing. There's always been, I think, eToro's approach is to make it accessible for most people. I think definitely the shift that I've seen from going years back when I started in eToro was very much more focused on, you mentioned that advert they had with different people in different windows. I think eToro's focus was much more on the gamification of investing, which kind of hit a snag. And I think in 2020, when with COVID, everybody was like going on apps like Robinhood and stuff like that. So it's obviously been a little bit of a blowback in terms of that, and especially in the States, and apps like Robinhood, where people speculating on with the stocks and when the meme stocks and things came out like that. So I think what eToro is doing now is bringing it back to more basics, for everyday people just looking for a way to invest in the markets, not crazy things like crypto and blockchain, but focusing on everyday things like they can invest in stocks and they can invest in ETFs, proper, good financial advice kind of things, like the one advert showing, diversification. So I think it's a good shift in general, especially, like I said, just in terms of the assets that eToro has also been making available lately, like things like ETFs. They've been pushing that a lot, which I think is a really good way, a good thing to do for most people, is to start investing in ETFs, and it's not just focusing on the GameStops of the world, or the blockchain, or the cryptos and things like that. So I kind of like what the direction they're going with these adverts.
Ingvar, would you go along with Reinhardt's summary?
Yeah, first of all, I don't get too many eToro ads myself, surprisingly enough. Maybe the algorithm has figured out that I'm already a heavy user. So thank you very much for sharing them. And just looking at those ads, I think the direction overall is not a bad one. I think there are some attributes to eToro which are attractive for people. And let's talk about, for example, it's for example the ease of access. You've got a large diversity of things you can invest in. And for me, the thing which should normally be standing out when advertising eToro is that you have a community around you as well. So if you are a newbie investor, for example, you also have the possibility to ask people for guidance in a certain direction. That might also be interesting for more sophisticated investors, by the way. So that is something which I think they usually also promote and advertise. And for me, that makes sense. Now, if I look at influencer marketing, for example, for me personally, it is not the most appealing, to be completely honest, because I just don't go along with those kind of promotions. I understand, though, that other people think differently about that, and they have their influencers and they like to trust those influencers. Nonetheless, I think it's always a good idea also to double check and cross check certain assumptions which are made in influencer marketing. That's, I think, always sane.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. To me, it maybe still falls short of the optimal approach, but it's edging towards realism, from what it was. Although it's not quite actual realism. But, if you're using these influencers, I'll say that again, influencers who, they have a body of work on YouTube and they talk about, sensible spending habits and budgeting and all this other stuff. And they're making sense to people and they're helping people with their own personal finances, then I can imagine it'd be quite effective if then they were saying, oh, there's this other thing you can do with your money. I've told you about putting your money in these high interest accounts or whatever other sensible things there are, and paying off your debts and prioritizing where you allocate your cash. I think it could be quite useful, although limited, I suppose, in the range of people that those would appeal to. What do you say, Gasper?
Yeah, I think the eToro's marketing people probably have one of the toughest jobs ever, because obviously they need to show some kind of a return on investment, right? I mean, these commercials, okay, I mean, it's, if you do like guerrilla marketing, like with influencers, that tends to be a little bit more budget friendly, but still the marketing spend is quite significant at eToro. And then the challenge is, how do you bring in, customers and increase sort of the trading volume, while at the same time educating people on the basic tenets of investing, which often go against the very thing that increases the trading volume, which is short-term thinking, etc. So it's a very, very tough challenge, I think, very difficult circle to square, or vice versa. What I'm seeing now is kind of a shift a little bit in the narrative, like more towards like the social aspect of investing, and sort of hinting a little bit that it's a copy trading, but then hinting as well that it's like a long term, that it's more of a sort of compounding interest. There are some keywords that I noticed in the last one with the lady influencer. She's talking about making wise money decisions, etc. And as Reinhardt pointed out in the beginning, there is this sort of narrative about diversifying. So it feels like, at least now, eToro is kind of more engaged into trying to show some substance into the ads, not merely presenting the platform and the core aspect that it used to be before, which is like, okay, turn your brain off and and just let the copy trading do its thing. Now it's more like, let's try to educate actually, and use these ads to sort of provide some kind of a educational layer to the whole thing. I don't know if I answered your question, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I can't remember what my question was, so that's fine. Well, I was talking about moving towards realism. What if we just went, what if eToro just went the full way to realism and got like regular users, 3 people who actually use eToro, like one who's a regular person who says, yes, I use it to buy stocks, ETFs, and crypto. I put money in every month. I've been investing for 6 years. Look, here's my data for the last 6 years. This is what I've made out of it. I like it. I keep all my investments in one place. It's easy to use. And then you have a copier who's like, I don't want to know all that stuff. I don't have time, basically. But I love the idea that I can pick a few people whose goals sound like mine, and I can copy their activity. I don't even have to pay them for it. It's free to copy. And the people I copy keep me up to date with things using YouTube and the like. So it's sweet. I've been doing it for 5 years, done well so far, bought a car, cashed out a couple of years ago to buy a new car. Now I'm building it up again, and I'm going to keep adding to my wealth over time. And then cut to a PI, somebody we all recognize from the platform, saying, yes, I manage a portfolio, and people copy me, and I've been doing it for 8 years. Here's my results. Pretty good. I've made money over that time, and I make money personally, depending on how many people are copying me. So that's a nice little income stream. And I think I provide a good service. My copier base is pretty happy. And then cut to them all having a coffee somewhere and clinking their cappuccinos, their tall, skinny frappes. Actual users with real profiles, real people talking about their experience on eToro. Wouldn't that cut through all of this stuff that people worry about? Is this a scam? And, these financial companies are, just out to get you. And how can you have faith in them? Here's 3 people that have been using it for several years. That would convince me, don't you reckon? Reinhardt.
Yeah, I think, when I started on eToro, it was, I don't think it was, eToro has been going through, I think, since 2009 or something, but I might be wrong. I think it's around about there. I started in 2016, but I think it was kind of completely new in South Africa. And I think eToro has definitely elevated their profile in terms of what they've done in terms of the media. Besides these adverts, like you said, some of the more silly ones, some of the ones that they focus heavily on crypto. I remember the ones that they used with Alec Baldwin. I love those because I love Alec Baldwin. But it was very much focused on crypto because that was the thing at the moment.
He's a straight shooter.
Yeah. I think we're a bit in trouble at the moment now, but like Gasper said, it's a fine balance because that is where the user growth was at that stage. So you've got to balance it out with being real as well. But if I bring it back to my examples, like when I talk to people when I started on eToro, people were like, what is this company? It's this Israeli company. They've got the bank is from Cyprus and stuff like that. And I think since then to now, a lot of it's changed just because from not just these ads, but that media profile. If I use another example, we're obviously big rugby fans here, so we're watching Tri Nations. So I saw eToro sponsoring the Australia rugby team. So if you watch the big rugby game between Australia and New Zealand, you see the eToro kind of marketing all over the place. And that in itself, I think, boosts the quality or the trust that people see. I know it sounds a bit silly because it's just marketing, but it's no longer just this fringe kind of funny financial fintech app. There's been, I think, what eToro has done a good job in terms of the marketing. There's so many, interviews with Yoni, with good, like, predominant individuals in the financial world. They've done some. I remember they got close to listing as well. So, and then obviously with the whole SPAC thing that didn't go through. But I think in general, when I talk to people now here in South Africa, I talked about eToro, it's no more like this fringe thing, like, oh yeah, no, we've heard about eToro, we've seen it. It's I don't have to convince them anymore. Like, no, it's not a scam. It's fine. People kind of they've seen it now and they kind of trust it more.
Yeah, the name recognition thing, I think, is definitely having an effect. Ingvar, when you talk to people and you mention eToro, how often do you have to explain it from scratch?
Maybe half the time. So some people know it, other people don't. It is, of course, not as mainstream as other local brokers, for example, simply because mostly the local brokers have been there for a longer time, or they have a different brand reputation, and they are associated to banks which have a 100-year history or something. So they, of course, have a bit of an advantage versus the new entrant. What I think, especially this year, and of course also last year is the case, is that it's not particularly easy to convince people to try a new broker when the market is currently not doing very well, which was especially tough last year. And I think it stretches into this year because obviously inflation is hitting pretty much everybody. So it's not a very easy environment. And then already to begin with, it's not particularly easy either to set up a marketing strategy which really works over time. And I think it's smart to try different things and see which things are working. And you, of course, have to tailor the strategy also to different target audiences. And for me, I'm not a marketing expert, but I understand as much that you cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach. So you really need to see, okay, who do I want to address? How much do I want to spend on that? And it feels to me with the 3 examples you were giving before, that's for a particular target audience, probably 3 different ones, 1 more general and 2 for more targeted audiences. I think it's good to experiment with that. And then I guess it will develop from there.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because now is very much a downtime in terms of general interest in the market. So I guess just as these crests and troughs happen, and eToro is always there, and it's still there when people come back to the markets or regenerate their own interest, they'll see that many may have come and gone, but if eToro is there year after year, obviously that builds confidence, doesn't it? The ongoing existence. Any final comments on eToro's advertising strategy? Who wants to raise their hand to be the popular investor that's featured in the adverts that I suggested? Somebody has a good track record, so I'm out.
Well, Gasper, earlier you mentioned, before we started typing, you mentioned, people specifically from markets that eToro wants to maybe target and branch into. So I've actually reached out once or twice to my account manager at eToro and said to him, look, if you guys are looking at expanding your profile in South Africa, hit me up. Let's do a conference or something. I'll be happy to do that, be that brand ambassador in South Africa with the audience, with here, because I think it's a huge opportunity for eToro in smaller, more developing countries like South Africa. I think the US market's obviously huge for them. I think they're starting there now. But yeah, with smaller companies like South Africa, I think there's huge potential as well there.
And is there ever going to kind of come a time when the United States just becomes part of the wider eToro world, or is that always going to remain its own little island? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think like the regulatory framework is what curbs, I think, a more sort of aggressive or faster, let's say, don't want to use that word, spread into other markets. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen with the US, but I do think that, SEC is kind of like a very strict player over there. So it's probably going to be a little bit segregated for a while.
I imagine
At least that's my speculation, yeah.
Okay, well, excellent contributions from all three of our panel of epic heroes. Whether their heroics will be reflected in their portfolio performance as we move into the second half of 2023 remains to be seen. But we wish them all the best and thank them for letting us inside their minds to share their very real, not artificial intelligence today. So I will leave links to all the individual long-form episodes of you three guys in the show notes if anyone's interested to understand our panel members on a deeper level. So our heartfelt thanks to Gasper.
Thank you. Likewise, I enjoyed this very much and look forward to the next time.
And to Ingvar.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
And of course to Reinhardt. Thanks very much for being with us today.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for inviting me back. It's been awesome.
And thanks to you, listener, viewer, depending on whether you're listening to the audio podcast or watching the video version on YouTube. So, hope you enjoyed this episode. See you on the next one. That's all from me. See you on Discord and Facebook. Until next time we meet at Copytraders Club, I wish you many happy returns. Obviously, anything you hear in this podcast is for entertainment only, not financial advice. Do your own research. This is just generic chit-chat. We don't know your individual circumstances, etc., and so forth.